First order of business is approval of the agenda with the addition of the HR addendum.
So moved. Second.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. Nobody had signed up to address the board this evening, so we'll move right into staff reports. And Laura, over at the FEA desk.
I've brought along with me Jolene Krabenhoft again. You met her before, but she wasn't here right at the beginning, so now you get to see her from the get-go. So not a full-on report, I just would like to mention that a couple of our cooperative efforts between FEA and FPS bore fruit. Since our last meeting, we had our Jeremiah book transfer. We brought over thousands and thousands of books, and you might have seen a little clip on the news or an article in the paper, The Journey, so that was pretty cool. And we started, this is less celebratory and more work, but we started a substitute issues task force joint effort. We had our first meeting a week and a half ago, and I think we're going to get some things, if not solved, then at least mitigated. So that's our report.
Thank you, Laura. Gets us to RS1, Equitable Resources and Planning. And I think we have a little report from Brittany on the HR department.
You do, and I will not read it to you. So I will just go through a couple highlights, share a few accomplishments, and some of our upcoming goals, and then, of course, be happy to answer any questions you might have. One thing we're very excited about on the HR payroll side is that this is the first year we'll be sending 1095 forms out with W-2s. So that is a feat that probably mainly due to my assistant director, Lori Feist. She and a couple other members of our team went through each individual 1095 to verify accuracy, go through and make corrections, because unfortunately a lot of that is not automated. Even though we can use the system to print them, a lot of that data is not accurate. So going through each one, they spent a lot of time doing that, and even though they're not due out to employees until March 1st, sending them together will alleviate a lot of questions that we tend to get if they're not out together when people are filing, and of course saves on postage. So we're thrilled to send them out together. We will be sending out about 2,002 1095 forms, along with the 3,420 W-2 forms for 2017. Another area that is newer, but started this, I think it was late summer, early fall, kind of started with some conversations from Dr. Schatz and Dr. Gross, and then some collaboration with Bill Westrick, who's in the back, and some of the schools we work most commonly with to place student teachers. It was Concordia, MSUM, VCSU, and NDSU. We got together and talked about the student teacher placement process, because what we found is there was some placements happening, and sometimes the buildings weren't aware, and sometimes we weren't aware on our side at the district office, and there was just some pieces of that weren't quite as clear as we would like them to be. So within that process, we set it up so that we have, starting with this spring 2018 semester, student teachers now come to the district office. There's a workflow that is entered, and then as long as the building principal has approved that placement, the student teacher comes in with their appropriate paperwork, including their background check, and then they're issued an FPS ID. They sign off on some of our policies, and they kind of find out what the expectations are in terms of being a member of FPS. So kind of lays that groundwork. We're really excited about it because it's really more of an official process for the students. And what we found is they're really, really excited about it. So really eager. I think they feel like, oh, this is really official. This is my job. So that's been fun to see, and we're continuing to roll that out with our student teachers, and I think this is going to be a really good process to kind of get a handle around that. So, and then I would be remiss if I failed to mention that we lost 2 long-term staff members in HR over the last year. So Jackie Prowse, who was the HR manager, and then Becky Genji, who you probably saw at the front desk often when you came in, both retired. With together they had 44 years of service to Fargo Public Schools. So we lost those 2 staff members. We did some restructuring, and we were able to find 2 wonderful new additions to our staff. So Kaylin Shokopleus, who's out at the front, so hopefully you've gotten to meet her, came to us from Seattle when she relocated. And then Allison Wolf is our new payroll technician. So hopefully you get an opportunity to meet some of our staff members, and they will be introduced to you in this week's cabinet column, so you kind of know who they are and what their roles are. But very excited to have them. And then Lori Feist did take on sort of a new role within the office and became the assistant director, and we consolidated that HR and payroll manager position. So had some opportunities to have some cost savings, plus give people opportunities to take on some new roles within the office. So as we look forward to the upcoming year, we had lots of recruitment last year. We were hoping for a slightly less busy recruitment season, and it turns out that's not going to be the case. So as you know, Anne Marie and I are working with your ad hoc committee for the superintendent search to support that. We will be opening up our middle school principal for Ben Franklin starting tomorrow, along with an assistant principal at South High. So those two will be coming. We are sitting at about the same number of retirement notices for our certified staff as we were last year at this point, so very similar in numbers. So we will be looking to open, positions that we need to and get those filled. Continuing to look at options using the Ed Jobs through the Minnesota schools and the North Dakota schools that we can get out to their career centers. Fortunately, we have some pretty good contacts with the schools that we work with regularly, so that helps us get names of students that are coming through the programs. And then some upcoming things that I'll be working on, beginning to research some alternative classified support staff compensation structures, just see what's out there, what opportunities we might have there, as we look to continue to provide competitive salaries, but to support our recruitment efforts and retention. And then, of course, we'll be watching as we see what unfolds with healthcare and making sure that we have the new updated tax tables, which have been released, and we are uploading those into our system. And then we will watch the new W-4, so we get that all up to date for our employees as soon as it's released as well. So some upcoming things and some things that we've been doing, so I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Rebecca.
Thank you for the report. On the last page, the HR noteworthy facts, where we talk about the substitutes and the substitute paras and the most challenging positions. I think we said this last year too, right? That the hardest positions to fill are at the elementary level, especially kindergarten, music, and art, along with special ed positions at all levels. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about that a little bit in terms of maybe why it's more challenging to fill those spots and some of what we're trying to do to help fill those or help recruit.
It is definitely more challenging to fill those spots. Sometimes, even when we call our subs that are on the list, they will decline taking the younger elementary spots. They're maybe just not as comfortable going into the classroom with the younger children. Sometimes behaviors are more challenging. So we definitely see that people are a little less likely to take those elementary spots than they are maybe the secondary level spots. We just have less substitutes in these specific areas of music or the specials. And then, of course, in special education, we have a shortage in terms of filling those positions anyways for regular positions. That's a very difficult area for us. So, of course, for substitutes, it is as well. So we are working, of course, as Laura mentioned, with the substitute task force to see what other avenues we can explore. We've done a lot of outreach through our own website, through our newsletters that go out through, not only through the school, through the journey, but also through the parents. School talk, we've done some recruiting on the radio, looking to try to do some of those kind of, try to catch people where they're at type, to promote the flexibility that would come from being a sub with our district.
And it's very nice to hear about the collaboration that the district is, and the FEA, because I think lots of times, folks might think that there isn't that collaboration that exists, so it's nice to be able to highlight that we are working together, not only on this issue, but on others, but it's refreshing to hear. So thank you for sharing that also, Laura.
Well, thank you very much, Brittany. It looks like you had really a light workload last year, and I'm sure it'll repeat itself this year. Good luck. That moves us to our next staff report, which is the long-range financial plan review. Turn it over to Dr. Schatz for any opening remarks.
Well, as you know, we have annually brought this to you to just give you an update on what we call projections more than anything with our long-range financial plan. Jackie, as you know, is our business manager now, and so she has gone through the plan and freshened it up, if you will, put her mark on it. And so I'm going to turn it over to her to walk you through some of the highlights and some of the things she wants to share with you. But one thing I would make a comment about is that when you look at some of the percentage projections, that's exactly what they are. They're not hard and fast, solid numbers. These are the best guesstimates that you can make with all the information you have. And so please, nobody walk out of here and say, well, you said that, and that wasn't what happened. So again, this is all about long-range planning. So Jackie, if you would, thank you.
Thank you. I as well will not read this report to you, so we will highlight some of the information. If you go to page 3, it's summarizing our budgeting philosophies as well as our current revised general fund budget as it sits today. And then going into the following pages are the assumptions that we used in this document, which we will, of course, update as information becomes available. I'll just highlight those. We are anticipating enrollment growth. It is in the budget or in these projections at 0.5%. And property tax, we are looking at a 4.5% increase going forward. State level funding, with the assumption that the per pupil payment won't change, we actually see a decrease in our state revenue due to the foundation or the mill levy deduct. And federal revenue will remain relatively constant. For expenditures, we provided a couple of examples at different percentage increases to staff. As that makes up the majority of our budget, we need to take a close look at what we'll be able to afford. Staffing levels will remain constant, and benefits are tied mostly to those salary increases, but for health and dental insurance, we have built in a 5% increase for health and a 3% for dental. That may be low for health insurance. As we look at that plan, we will firm those numbers up at well. And just some minor increases are in the line items for utilities and those costs that we know fluctuate slightly every year. And so those are the basic assumptions that we use. The 5 through 11 has a lot of narrative in it, just some background information, historical information, and then some graphs that go along just to help you have a look at what we potentially should be planning for. Page 12 has some items to consider for the future that we'll have to look at as we begin this budgeting process for 2019. And I won't go through them in detail. I don't think there's anything in there that would be new news to any of you. And then the appendix just contains some more of the detailed calculation as well as line item projections for you to review. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Don't see any. Obviously, this is data we've been looking at year after year after year and refreshing. And thank you for putting in the alternatives of the 2 and the 3%, just so we have those ranges to be thinking about going forward. Any closing thoughts on this one?
Well, I want to turn your attention to the addendum where we talk about general fund mill levy projections, and again, the estimated percentage increase in valuation, because that always gets discussed, and people are always wondering, what's that going to be, and how, you know, because that really determines how many new dollars we get from local tax dollars with the mill levy that we have. And really, as we went out and we promoted the mill levy last year, talking about the past history of what the valuation increases had been, we knew they were going to slow down, and that's what's happening. And so I think it is prudent on Jackie's part to be conservative, to put in that 5.5%, 4.5% as we look forward. Now, obviously, that again is with all the best possible information we have. Could that change? Possibly, but everything I've seen with building permits, everything I've seen with development, and all the things that I look at, I don't see it being much more than that. And I'm not hearing that. And so that is the crux of our overall budget, because that's where we're getting our revenue. We are not going to get it from the state. That foundation deduct is a real problem, and we're going to actually have less dollars in foundation aid payment from the state, regardless if we have 90 new students, and when you do those calculations. And so as the interim education committee is meeting in Bismarck this week on Thursday, the North Dakota Council of Educational Leaders has a finance committee, and they will be making reports to the interim educational legislative committee. They're going to be looking at all the foundation pieces. I don't anticipate big changes coming in the new legislative session, and we'll talk more about this in GAC. I can give you more on that. But I continue to impress upon the NDCL committee that deduct is a real problem for the Fargo School District. It's not a problem for other districts. It all depends on your tax base and all your valuations, and all those types of things. And so I will continue to push that with that committee, but that doesn't mean that means that'll cause something to happen with that part of the foundation aid payment. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention again, because we talk about that all the time. But that's really the concern we have with revenue when it comes to that. So other than that, Jackie's doing a great job, and I'm really glad to have her on as business manager. So thank you for doing all you do.
That gets us to our third staff report, and that's just an update and look at the long-range facility plan. And I'll go back to Dr. Schatz again for any overviews.
This is, again, a review of our plan with you that we do annually. And so we've made updates to that. And so as that had been presented to you in your pre-meeting data and information, if you've had an opportunity to look through it, really a majority of this is a report back to you from the RSP report, which you were given earlier this year. So a lot of that is in the front side of this, just to kind of set the table for what are we looking at in enrollment projections, what are we looking at when it comes to our overall facility usage and capacity of our facilities and those types of things. I did continue to keep a bit of a historical perspective in the front of the report, because I changed it up a little bit this year because the old report was getting a little bit cumbersome. And so we did keep that in there for some of the major things that we've done, refreshing people's memories about all the things we did to 6 different elementary facilities to upgrade their HVAC systems at a time when we really needed to do that, to the infill projects of 2 elementary schools that have really solidified that whole attendance base, if you will, for our elementary schools, to an operational center where we went through 2 years of negotiations and construction because of the flood buyout with the city, and we had to move the operations center, to a whole lot of other things that have gone on with the long-range facilities plan when it comes to operations and maintenance. And I have Jim here tonight to talk to you about some of that. But there's been a whole lot that's gone on in the last 4 or 5 years that sometimes people forget as you move from year to year. And as we move forward, we know that growth in the far south end of town is going to continue to be something that we need to monitor, because in small sectors of our overall attendance areas, we're going to have some overcrowding potentially down the road. And we know that through our enrollment reports. And so nothing new about any of that, because we've talked about those things, and they're eventually going to come and have to be dealt with. In addition to that, we do make note about the overall issues that we're trying to deal with when it comes to behaviors of students and where students are educated and how we deal with that, talking about what we call a Setting D program, and also talking about our early childhood special ed program and the increasing numbers in that program, and how do we continue to be able to facilitate the needs of those students within the existing facilities that we have. And so the whole crux of the long-range facilities plan really does focus now on those issues, those new issues that are presenting themselves. But again, nothing new. This stuff's been coming at us for a long time. So again, our projections, as you look through this, looking at about 100 to 150 students per year, we're still holding to that kind of projection. We've had a 99% accuracy rate with RSP, and there's no reason to doubt the fact that they are right on again with what they're projecting. Rob did make some adjustments to the long-range numbers, and he brought them down a little bit from what he had a couple of years ago. But again, that also is a pattern that we see throughout our district of just a little bit of a slowdown, but actually it's pretty modest and easy to manage right now for our district. I've said to you over and over again, the infrastructure's in place, and if the economic scenarios come together, we could have an explosion, because there's many, many, many infrastructure pieces put together in the far south end of town, and if all of a sudden they all decided to develop, all those permits happened, and all those people came, you'd have a scenario like West Fargo. But I don't see that happening anytime in the near future, but it's certainly a setup for that. So we're still moving towards that 12,000 student number, way out to 2022, 23. He's got us at about 11,900, and so we'll continue to grow. As you look at the different buildings, as we talked about earlier this year, really the only two buildings that give any concern are Discovery and Davies, and we all know that. Claire Barton always shows up with that orange line, but that's just because they're at capacity, but they're in a very stable attendance area. We just don't see that changing, and so they're in a very good place, and so no need to worry about that. But as you look at the Davies and Discovery attendance areas, you see as we move out, and I always look at the student by residence is the one that I always pay attention to. You can see Davies getting to that 1368 in the year 2021-22, and you can see Discovery hitting that 11,000 mark at the same year. And we've always said at Discovery about that 1,100 students is about what we would consider capacity for their school. And so that leads into what we're doing there, where we actually have a project that we're planning for at Discovery and the needs that they have. And so that all, again, plays right into the long-range facility plan update on pages 9 and 10. And so we stayed with the similar themes that we had from the past, but in number 1, grade configuration and paired schools, you'll see 2 additional things in there that explain in a little more detail the early childhood special education program and the Setting D programs. We are set up at the retreat to have a much more in-depth discussion about that, and so I'm not going to go into that detail tonight. We know the Discovery project is on its way, and the only other piece, and I'm going to have Jim speak to this, I always like to hear how many miles of sidewalks we plow and how many this and that, but I'm going to have Jim get up and talk about the long-range operational maintenance budget and how he schedules that 10-year chart that you always see in this plan. So Jim, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me again. It's hard to believe it's been a year already, but time goes on. First of all, before I start, I wanted to also thank the guys I work with pretty almost daily. Kevin Hagnes, who does grounds, Mike Semenko, who does custodial supervising, and then Jeremy Wolf, the trades and electrical, and actually all the staff that I manage. I want to thank them too. Dr. Schatz asked if I would bring a couple of these stats here today, and to let you know that we have 4,491 parking stalls in Fargo schools, 126 additional handicap spots. Our parking lot acreage is 29.4 acres of land we use just for parking in Fargo schools. 25 playgrounds, and again, 27.7 miles of sidewalks. So if it snows an inch or 2 inches, we still got to clean it off. So it's a lot of man hours to do that. And this is a number I found today. We have 186,000 square feet of play areas, playgrounds. We have solid surface areas that they do different things on, pavement and concrete and such. But that all those areas would not fit into Carl Ben Eielson if you took the square footage wise. So there's a lot of play surface that we actually use. 461 acres of land that we use for our sites, for all of our areas. 319 acres of green space, and 98.5 acres that we irrigate for sports fields and other areas. And then, of course, we have our total building square footage with the new operations center and the old one removed, and our other rental that we have taken off too. But it's 2,851,000 square feet we maintain. So it's a lot of carpet, a lot of roofs, a lot of everything. So anyway, and we're happy to do it too, usually. Again, just some mechanical numbers. We have 941 fan heating coil units, heat pumps out at the south end of town, 462 heat pumps, and exhaust fans, 384, so on and so forth. The numbers just get really, really big, and again, a lot of hands have to touch those, make them work. And anyway, again, thanks to the staff. Some of you have asked me in the past, how do I get the information for the long-range plan? And I meet annually with the principals, and also with our staff that bring things forward. The HVAC technician might say, boy, this air handler is getting really bad, we're sticking a lot of parts into it. Can we look at replacing it? So we write those down and we sort of strategize when that would be appropriate to do. Of course, this plan is really good except for things break down. We had a $30,000 unexpected breakdown on a boiler at Ben Franklin just during December. We thought it would last about 3 more years, but didn't make it. So we juggle things around to make it all work. Another one, just found out this week, the South High pool bleachers. I had a firm come in to do some maintenance on it, and with the corrosive environment in the pools, it just corroded away. Bolts are corroded away. The iron is actually eaten away by the chlorine in the pool. So it just needs to be replaced. It's beyond its serviceable life. So anyway, that jumps to the head of the list and something else gets pushed back, and luckily we can do that. Again, it's ever-changing. I'm not going to go through the whole book here to tell you what's in it. You can look in there and find out. But probably the first year of the plan is pretty accurate. The second one gets a little bit less. And you look out 4 or 5 years, it's really difficult to plan some of that stuff. Of course, we want to change the roofs at the end of their useful life. We don't want to do it 5 years before because there's 5 years of life left in it. So why would we change it early? So try to figure out when that is, because sometimes a roof that looks good, sometimes it leaks a little earlier, and so we have to move things around. So I think you get the idea. Anyway, yeah, with that, I think maybe next fall or so when we probably should call ICS in. We haven't had them for, about 5 years or so. The people that help us develop this original plan, but it might be a good time to sit down with them and revisit and say, are we on the right path here? Our numbers look good or not? So anyway, any questions from anybody at all that you would have? Well, thank you very much.
Well, before you go, Jim, first of all, I think Dr. Schatz had a comment or question.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the highlight of the year for the Operation Maintenance Department was the parking lot out here. And which really solidifies the thinking of one thing's for sure, nothing. But before I leave, the one thing I'm working on is a sign that would say free parking for our parking lot. And I'll just let you think about that for a moment.
Well,
So
you would think it would be
anyways,
good to
we're
find
gonna name
oil
it that.
in North Dakota on your property, but not when it's in a tank. So
And so-
anyway, that was an expensive endeavor. But we have a new parking lot, and I'm still here. So.
Yeah. So anyways, thanks, Jim, for all
Sure.
you do. You do a great job.
Jim, will you do me a favor and pass along the board's thanks to your entire team?
I will do that.
I don't know how many people in this community realize what time a lot of your guys get up in the morning to take care of those sidewalks, those parking lots, especially in the wintertime. And it really doesn't slack off much in the summer because I can't remember how many, 416
61.
461 acres, most of which has to be mowed.
Yeah.
So-
It's a big animal.
A
you know.
big thank you
Yeah,
from the
Thank
board.
you. I will certainly do that and appreciate everything you guys do too. So thank you.
Through our staff reports into the consent agenda, and the chair would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda with the addition of the HR addendum.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. That gets us to our first business item, actually our only business item of the evening, and that is memo number 75, GP 3, 9, and 10. I think everybody's probably had a chance to go through it. Chair would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the report GP 3, 9, 10 monitoring document as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I will note that there were a couple of suggestions in terms of wordsmithing. Those will certainly be looked at over at governance, and most likely we'll come back with some modifications at our next board meeting for board consideration. Seeing no hands go up, Anne Marie, if you could call the roll, please.
Ulrich? Yes. Ani?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Boyd? It's not here, sorry. Goldenberg?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Rodenbaker?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes. Motion carries. Gets us to our board reports, and we'll start with a superintendent search update. You feel like giving this? You want me to sub for you?
Why don't you go for it, and then I'll add in if need be.
Fill in if I need to. The committee met today. Obviously, Brittany and Anne Marie have been working daily on this since we first started the process. We don't know who these people are, nor are we going to find out who these people are until they actually come in with a slate of recommendations and a list of everybody that applied. But as of this morning, we had 13 people who had requested application materials from Ray and Associates, which is pretty good this early in the process, so that's a good sign. A couple of dates to make sure you have on your calendar. One is March 10th. That is the Saturday where Ray and Associates will be here. They're going to provide us with a look at who they're recommending. I think that'll include the opportunity to watch a short video from each of those recommended candidates. And obviously that's where we'll then be discussing who we might want to bring in for interviews. We're thinking currently, although this is still a moving target, that it'll be the week of March 19th that we'll probably be having candidates come in. So as a board member, I would ask you to block out that week. And right now, although this is getting finalized, we believe the board interviews will actually be happening first thing in the morning. And then we may have some kind of social or dinner with the candidate at the end of their day. But we talked about it quite a bit. In the past, the board has been the last group that the candidate met with. And quite frankly, they were pretty worn out by the time they got to the board because it was a long day of being interviewed by multiple groups. So we think maybe having us be the first and getting them at their freshest might be a better way to go. That's not finalized in stone yet, but at least from a calendar holding perspective, please keep those dates open. I want to thank those of you that had submitted suggestions on additional questions for the board interview panel. All of those suggestions were added into the list, so we've got those pretty well getting finalized. And just a side note, those questions are being held pretty closely to the belt by Anne Marie because we don't want any candidates, external or potentially internal, actually knowing what our questions are going to be before we actually get to ask them. But obviously we'll take a look at those as we get closer to the actual interview date. I think that was about all the updates. Anything I missed there, Chief?
Did you want to talk about Ray and Associates in another district in the state?
Yep. One other item that I think you're all aware of, we negotiated in our contract with Ray and Associates that we would have the right to strike down them doing a superintendent search for any adjacent districts that we felt would be competing with us. Obviously, when we put that forward, we were thinking probably immediate Red River Valley districts. Last week, I think all of you probably had the opportunity to have a conversation with Gary Ray or somebody from his staff. During my conversation with Gary, he indicated they had been contacted by a small district someplace out in western North Dakota. He couldn't remember the name. He'd never heard of them before. He didn't think it would be a problem, but he was going to have his staff track down the name of the district and get it to me. Before they could do that, the next day I actually got a call from another member that's a school board member from Dickinson wanting to know how we decided who our search firm was going to be because they're in the midst of deciding between Ray and Associates, McPherson, and a couple of the others that we looked at. So I shared some insights with her, didn't tell her that, you know, I'm going to have to chew this over with my board and decide if we'll let Ray and Associates work with them. I'll just share two thoughts. Number one, I'm not certain Dickinson is what I'd call a peer competitor of ours when it comes to the search. Typically, their superintendents have come from western North Dakota or Montana. But that being said, they're certainly a larger district in our state. I do believe, though, based on their timing, because they haven't even decided yet who they're going to go forward with, and then there's a process that has to take place, that they won't even probably have their superintendent search opened before ours closes. So as your board president, I at least do not feel it's a conflict, but so I'm okay in my mind with Ray and Associates if they're selected, serving as the firm for that search. But again, I wanted to share that with the rest of the board in case anybody else has strong feelings. And if you do, and it's the consensus of the board to tell Ray and Associates no, then I'll reach out to them and let them know that we don't feel they can take that search on while they're doing ours. Any thoughts on that? Jennifer?
How big is their district? How many students do you know?
I'm going to say about 4,000 students.
Okay.
I could be off, though, a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
All I can tell you is they have one high school, one middle school, and I think 4 elementary, but I don't know the total number.
Yeah.
So they're not as big as you might think. But they're in a growth model right now too, so, but that's what they have for schools.
We talked about it as a committee this morning, and realistically, we're not going to get their leftovers. If anybody's going to get leftovers, they'll get our leftovers just because of the timing here. And that's why we didn't feel it would really be a conflict with us. But again, I wanted to make sure you were all aware of this. Anne Marie, Brittany, anything else on the Superintendent Search Committee? Jennifer?
On the agenda, there was it discussed about community membership today?
Yeah, we've been assembling a list of different, I'll call them entities or organizations that we're going to be reaching out to see if they would have somebody that would be willing to serve. In some situations, we've actually identified who we'd like, but others are organizations that might have multiple people that could. And I believe probably within the next week or so, part of it is we can't really reach out to these people till we got a little more clearly defined when they're going to be asked to do these interviews. And I think we've kind of locked on that, or at least tentatively locked on it for that week of March 19th. So I believe that process is going to unfold over the next couple of weeks. If anybody has an organization or an entity that you think should be considered, please get that over to Anne Marie. Our goal is to end up with probably 8 to 9 people. We're under no illusion that everybody we call is going to say, oh yeah, I've got 5 days in a row that I can give you 2.5 hours of my life. So we'll probably have some that thank us for the opportunity and pass. And that's why we would like to have as long a list as possible to work through. And if you want to actually see the list of what we've accumulated so far, that can certainly get emailed out to everybody. Anne Marie, could you make a note to send that out? And like I say, if you think of an organization, a business, one of the things we looked at when we started going through this was really identifying entities, associations, organizations in the community that really partner with the district quite a bit, and in lots of different ways too. It could be everything from United Way, who does a lot of good advocacy work on our behalf, to NDSU, who through their education department does a lot with our teaching and learning area. So we looked at, not just the typical things like a chamber, which obviously is on the list, but also what organizations do we partner with that we want to make sure we continue to have strong partnerships with. So when you see that list, if you think of an entity, please get it back to Anne Marie. So she'll have it on that list as they try to formulate that committee. Any other questions for the search committee? And just so everybody's aware of the fact, the only reason our chair is not giving this report is she has about 10 words left in her vocal cords at best today. She's been a real trooper. I thought we'd have a substitute tonight. She told me maybe tomorrow, but I'm going to be there for the board meeting. So thank you for toughing it out for us, Anne Marie. With that, we'll move on to committee and liaison reports, and we'll start with David tonight.
About the only thing notable at all that I've done since the last meeting was to speak with Gary Ray. It was a very good conversation. He's a very impressive person. I think we chose well.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Grab my notes here from, there was a health insurance committee meeting right before our board meeting, so I'll just share a few highlights there. They reviewed 2007, basically, claims and costs, sorry? 17, yes. Way back, 2007. Sorry, 2017, yes. And, all right, so basically the headliner that came out of today's meeting, which is a very positive one, was that FPS came in a little below budget. So we'll take it, even though it was a little below budget, which was very nice. Again, we talked a little bit about the tool that I had mentioned to you last time, and this time in terms of ways that they can help employees or those that participate in one of the plans to better choose one of the two plans offered that most likely would fit their benefit or their needs within the, either single or family benefit. And so they talked about return on investment today around that. There were a couple of highlights around transitional insurance fees going away, so that was another positive highlight. And online tools that are offered around wellness from Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And that was pretty much all the highlights from today. That's it.
Thank you, Jennifer. John.
Thank you. Negotiations met with FEA back on the 11th. Just introductions, setting ground rules, setting some next meeting dates, of which our next meeting date will be the 1st of February, next week already. And I'm sorry, our committee does not have a next meeting date scheduled yet. I'm going to be working on that, so hopefully we meet before we sit down with FEA again. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Brandy.
Thank you. I had a meeting today with the Fargo Youth Initiative, and that a committee is basically ran by the students and a couple people from City of Fargo. They have a plan to do Fargo, Impact Fargo on April 23rd. They have some speakers in mind, but they don't have everything set in stone, so they're still kind of in the phase of planning it all out. And I also had a conversation with Gary Ray, very nice guy. And then I'm in the process of setting up my liaison visits for Kennedy and Discovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. Dinah.
So I had my call with Ray too. Third time is a charm. Planning committee and superintendent search, but the most important, communications. Those of you who are on communications received an email from me yesterday requesting that you fill out a doodle poll so that we can set our next meeting. Please, please, please respond no later than Friday so that we can get it on everybody's calendar and move forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinah. Rebecca.
Either Christie or I, right? Okay, tomorrow I am going to NDSU, some of the EL students that have done some of the writing that we've all been familiar with in the district are going to be doing some reading from their stories. So I plan to go there tomorrow. And the Native American Commission meets next February 1st. And I'll be then just looking forward going to the chamber, the eggs and issues on February 6th, and the negotiation seminar coming up the 8th and the 9th. I just wanted to mention too that I enjoyed attending the chamber State of the Cities event. Was that a couple weeks ago? But just very entertaining and a lot of good information from all of the mayors, our 4 mayors. Thank you.
Thank you. Christie?
I attended the planning committee meeting, and that's about it for notables.
Super. I've got a couple of dates that Anne Marie has been kind enough to make sure we don't lose track of. I just want to highlight a few of these as they're coming around. First and foremost, our next official meeting is actually going to be February 2nd, and that'll be a retreat. We're going to start at 8 o'clock right here. So we'll have probably a little bit of light stuff to snack on and hopefully a big pot of coffee. Yeah, and we're going to finalize the agenda for that retreat, which is pretty well finalized, but we're going to go over it and make sure we've got everything ready for it at our governance meeting, which will be happening this Thursday at 7:30. I already mentioned the March 10th date that you need to have on your calendar, and the week of March 19th that you want to try and block out at least the mornings of that week as we try to hold those as placeholders for our interviews with candidates. And of course, I know it seems so far away, but the picnic is 2 weeks closer now than the last time I mentioned it. And the sooner you start collecting door prizes, the happier I'll be, and the less likely I'll keep hounding you about it going forward. But that's scheduled for August 1st. With that, I think that concludes your president's report. And do we have a need to go into executive session, John?
I would move that we enter executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategy as permitted under North Dakota Century Code, Section 44-04-19.1.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do I need a roll call on this? If you would be so kind, Anne Marie.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes. It's been moved, seconded, and passed by the board to move to executive session. So at this point in time, I need to ask everybody who is not seated at the table to please exit the room. And we'll take a